Earlier this year, I started working on a video about shoujo manga, but I scrapped it. Why? Well, it's cause shoujo fucking suck. Last week I was talking with my new coworker. I was just trying to get to know her better, vibe with her a bit, and we started talking about some shared hobbies and interest. Anime came up, and she's a couple years younger than me, so we watched the same shows, watched the same channels. She is into a lot of the same stuff that I am. However, she does not really fuck with shoujo at all. Now, this reminded me of my earlier scrapped video, and I probed a bit. I asked her, well, what do you not like about shoujo? She elaborated and mentioned that there were a number of shoujos and josei that she did enjoy. Obviously, the classics growing up, like Card Captors and Sailor Moon, Fruits Baskets, Karekano, Nana, and also like a lot of work from Clamp, Chobits, Tsubasa, Reservoir Chronicles, Holic. I don't know, Clamp's series are all kind of the same, TBH. But that's normie stuff. She continued on and said that there's not much to shoujo that she enjoys. The stories are very boring and simple, many of them taking place in high school or with like a large romantic subplot. She doesn't really enjoy the male harems because the characters aren't that interesting, and the aesthetic just wasn't for her. And you know what? I get it. Yeah, those are stereotypes of shoujo, but those are accurate stereotypes. There's a reason why her, me, and many others have these sentiments about the shoujo demographic. Colleen's Manga Recommendations is a YouTube channel that has been looking at shoujo and josei anime and manga with a very in-depth angle. I'm really into her content. I'm inspired by Colleen's work, actually. Some months back, I started seeing multiple negative commonalities with her work, and that is what inspired me to start going back to the shoujo that I came up on, and not just revisiting it but like re-examining it, and to read a lot of modern shoujo and see if the hate that shoujo currently gets, if it's valid or not. Colleen looks at shoujo from a very positive perspective, and she's very defensive of it, but I'm starting to think that she's missing the bigger picture as to why shoujo fell by the wayside. The reason why shoujo isn't popular anymore is because that entire industry cannibalized itself. If there's one thing that bothers me about shoujo fans, it's their lack of self-awareness. If someone says that there is a particular aesthetic to something and it doesn't really intrigue them, you can't fault them for not wanting to explore it or similar works because they're just not visually attracted to it. And manga is a visual medium. Shoujo does have a particular aesthetic. It's not really a manga aesthetic. It is exclusive to shoujo. Is that the fault of the fans who like to consume that particular aesthetic? Is it the fault of the magazines for continuously pushing similar looking shoujo? Or is it the fault of the mangaka for not really developing their art style into something more modern and appealing? I think to varying degrees, it's a combination of all of those factors, but there's also that lack of self-awareness from shoujo fans. Honey Lemon Soda is one of the most popular manga titles today, and that is a traditional shoujo through and through. It would be very hard for me to take a story that visually looks like it could have came out of 1996 and sell it to someone in 2023 when they already do not like that particular aesthetic. There is a reason why genres across the decades have developed the way their characters are drawn. They develop the way you frame your comics. That's just how art is. It needs to develop over time. It's not just about the tools that you use, it's also about your perspective and your approach to the creation process. I enjoy shoujo art. I am able to look past the repetitiveness of that particular aesthetic because I genuinely like it. And I know there are plenty of romance, josei, and shoujo mangaka who have very elaborate, developed art styles. But the thing is, the vast majority of them aren't super popular, or they come from series that ran years, decades back. And don't even get me started on the writing. Shoujo has so many flaws with its approach to writing characters. Look, Oran High School did the harem thing, but the reason why it worked so well is because each of those characters embraced their tropes, but they were well developed. They weren't necessarily deconstructions, they weren't pivot points to what we expected. They were just well done, and there was a realization from the creative team that we need to push our cast. We need to give them individuality and personality, and they have to have their own things going on. They have to have their own world that's separate from the main character. With many shoujos, the story revolves around a plain Jane Mary Sue self-insert. There's like 5 great looking dudes whose sole existence in life is to hover around the main character. They're there to empower her. They want to help her with any of her troubles. They're definitely going to support her with any of her decisions. There may be like 1 or 2 that have like a serious love interest, and there's the best friend. It's also fucking cookie cutter. I'm sorry, I refuse to believe that there's ever been anyone anywhere in the world who had like 5 supermodel type dudes hovering around her and they're not like raw dogging. Come on, those sorts of stories are extremely juvenile and they're not realistic. Maybe that shit was popular in the 90s or so, but I don't think shoujo stories are reflective of what their intended demographics are experiencing today. Relationships don't really operate like that. Friendships don't operate like that. In fact, it would be pretty suspect to most women if there were a group of dudes who hover around her and who's always there to uplift her for every single thing in her life. That's a little peculiar for anyone, regardless of your gender, especially if you're consuming media like that. That sort of escapism works when you exude horse girl energy, but if you're like a regular human being, as you grow, you're not going to connect with these characters. You're not going to connect with the relationships that they have or how they engage with one another. I don't know many shoujos that go on for 10, 15, 20 plus volumes that are able to develop the relationship between female and male characters properly. Now, I don't want this to come off as a sweeping statement. There are plenty of shoujos that buck that trend and develop their characters very well across the board, but at the same time, there are even more shoujos that only focus on the relationships between the main characters, and then you have a supporting cast who, again, their existence is solely to support main leads get past the will they, won't they stage. The will they, won't they stage works when they do things along the way. Friends can have Ross and Rachel do will they, won't they for 10 years because they do hook up over time. They do have a child over time. They do decide to get married. They do decide to split up. They do decide to make it work at the end. There is an evolution of these characters. That's real life. With that sort of progression with your writing, not only does it show that the mangaka is able to develop their story and keep readers interested, but it means that the reader is going to be able to put a lot more of themselves into these Mary Sues. Many shoujo writers don't understand that. Again, this could be a decision of the editors and the magazine, and they're handcuffing the creatives, making sure that they only do a particular story so they can guarantee their paycheck for another 3 months. I don't know, but what I do know is that many fans feel that with shoujo, there's just not enough development with the art style. There isn't enough progression with the writing, and that's something that I never really see Colleen address with her videos. Which brings me to my next issue with her content and other shoujo creators as well. I know I'm picking on Colleen today, but that's because I really appreciate her work. And while I can't claim to have watched all of her videos, I've watched more than enough to see this repetition of whataboutisms and deflection. In so many of her videos, whenever stereotypes of shoujo is brought up, Colleen is quick to point out that shonen does the same.
You say this about shoujo characters, but shonen characters also do this too. Well, shoujo magazines were doing this for so long because shonen magazines were doing this for decades.
Yeah, we get it. Shonen and shoujo are very popular genres / demographics. There is a reason why there are so many shonens that come out and so many of them are dog shit. It's because it's a product. If I point out a reason why I don't like a particular product, you can't say, well, there's no reason for you to dislike this because this other product does it too. And you purchase that product, so what's the problem? There's a stronger appeal to most shonen over shoujo, and it's not really a target demographic thing. The trials and tribulations of characters in shonen are much more relatable to a vast majority of people at many points in time of their life. For example, Dragon Ball. There is something extremely interesting about Goku's evolution as a character, and I think that's why so many people have been able to relate to Dragon Ball and continue to enjoy it as they enter adulthood. Seeing Goku as a young boy, an orphan, develop a found family, one that sticks with him for the rest of his life, that's so incredible. As someone who wasn't necessarily close with their family, seeing Goku develop his friendship with Bulma, with Chi-Chi, with Krillin, and seeing him have kids, Gohan and Goten, the way he interacted with Vegeta, who he himself became a father, all of this is something that appeals to men and women. There are plenty of people who keep friends for 10, 20 years. My friends who I've known for 20 years are having kids of their own now. They're getting married, they're progressing with their careers, but we still laugh and joke and talk about the same things and do a lot of similar stuff to what we did when we first met one another. But we have the entire journey in between that has developed so much. Some people have left, some people have come back, but that's what life is. Life is about progressing and moving on. There are so many other examples I could use of shonen that are able to develop their stories over time or provide real nuance to their characters. Yes, there are shoujos that do that. Seven Seeds does that. That's a masterpiece for sure. Nana does that. Princess Jellyfish does that. But at the same time, the vast majority of shoujos that I've read, a lot of the shoujos that are recommended, it takes forever. It's a glacial pace for anything to happen, and if the art isn't bumping, it's really hard to keep an audience long term. If other genres and demos are able to mitigate these issues of audience retention over time, I look at shoujo and I wonder how come they weren't able to do the same thing. Romance stories, shoujo and josei, were popular from the 80s until like the mid 2000s. It was very common for people who were into Dragon Ball to also watch Sailor Moon and Cardcaptors and Escaflowne and not think anything about, oh, well, this wasn't made for me. I'm not the intended audience. They watched it because these were good fucking shows that were able to transcend their tropes, transcend their medium, and just become good content. Sailor Moon taught me a great lesson when I was a kid that has stuck with me into adulthood. All you need to do to gaslight your lover is change the color of your shirt, deepen your voice, and pretend to be someone different. They'll stick with you through whatever. And trust me, that method goes a long way with Brampton girls. I don't get a lot of great lessons from shoujo. A lot of them are irrelevant to anyone over the age of 15, and there are even teenagers who look at shoujo and just see it as being juvenile. If someone mentions that, you can't just deflect it. You have to say, well, you know what? You're right. There are series that do kind of do that with shoujo, but I think you may enjoy this particular series. Don't immediately say, well, yeah, sure, maybe this shoujo does do that, but these 5 shonens you like also do that. I'm now even less interested to talk to you or know anything about your opinion on shoujo because you're just being a defensive fan. On the topic of being a defensive fan, what is up with the comments? Even before I started following Colleen on Twitter, I kept seeing all of this discourse between comments on her content from TikTok or, like Twitter would like suggest tweets, and I would never really see praise for a comment that was pushing against what her point was. It was always,
LMAO, do you see what this idiot had to say? They completely missed the point.
and I would read the comment. Sometimes they were dog shit comments like, Colleen, I get it. I get some really bad comments in my section, but a lot of the times it feels like this is just someone who watched a video essay and they're providing a long answer, but what do you expect? You're talking about nerdy anime stuff to other anime nerds. You are going to get someone who feels very passionately about this topic too, and whether it's coming from a positive place or not, you are going to get these comments. To clip these comments and block them, not even respond to them, and then go to your echo chamber and say, look at this foolishness, like that's fucking weird. That's some weirdo behavior if you ask me. I'm not saying you have to engage with every single dumb comment you get or every single thought-provoking comment that's counter to what your point is, but What do you expect? You're talking about anime. We're going to get these sorts of comments when we're talking about anime. Some self-awareness about our niche community and the things that we would have to put up with. I don't know, that would probably be appreciated. Seeing you hop to your echo chamber every single time is, to me, a bad reflection of shoujo fans and shows their sensitivity. I regularly get called a nigger in my comment section. I've had people say that this monkey shouldn't be talking about anime. What does he know? Because I point out flaws of some stupid shonen. I get shonen tards who say dumb things in my comment section all of the time, and while I do engage with some of them, I also understand this is content creation. If you need to seek out an echo chamber to reinforce your sensitivity, then I don't know, maybe you should just disable comments to begin with, because you're not looking for anything that's going against the grain. And that's something I've seen with other shoujo creators too. I don't want to single out Colleen or make it seem like this is something she does all of the time. It is something she does often, though. I'm going to move away from Colleen for a bit. I want to look at shoujo fans and content creators as a whole when it comes to the shoujo demographic slash genre topic. Shoujo is a demographic, for sure, but it is a demographic that has sellable tropes that need to be inserted into every story. That's just the nature of the business. The thing is, I have never seen any group of fan base complain so obsessively over a mislabeling like I have shoujo fans when it comes to genre slash demographic. What's the fucking deal? I don't understand. Young adult was a big thing for like 5 to 10 years in media. I'm talking 9-figure IPs that were all relatively the same. They had sellable tropes and traits to their characters that needed to be inserted for every story. Later Harry Potter, Twilight, Divergent, Maze Runner, Hunger Games, all of these series are basically the fucking same. And if you're a mega fan, I could see getting into the nitty gritty about the nerdy shit, like the labeling and generalizations of your media. But if that's one of your biggest complaints and you feel that's a slight towards the thing that you love, then the world must be in a really great place if that's your biggest fear. I have to worry about teenagers on the TDC letting off fireworks right beside my head. That's my biggest fucking fear. I'm not super pressed, and nor do I want to go on tirades about people who say that Skip and Loafer is a shoujo. I know Skip and Loafer isn't a shoujo, but does it have shoujo elements to it? Yes. Is it presented as an anime that could sell well to a shonen fan base, a seinen fan base, but also hit up an older female audience? Obviously, you should look to get as many people with your product as possible. You don't see many horror or previously mentioned young adult fans lose their shit when someone mislabels a family movie as a young adult movie or a suspense thriller as a horror. Most people are just happy to get good property that is influenced by other things, that is trying to get as large of an audience as possible. Which brings me to my final point and problem with shoujo and shoujo creators, and something that I will be exploring further on my channel over the next few months as I start reviewing shoujo manga and josei. I think there is a lack of product understanding. I know some people get extremely turned off when they start hearing about business when it comes to art, but successful art is equal parts creativity and commerce. Cry about it. These are fucking cartoons, bro. I can get super obsessive and analytical over cartoons. I love anime. I think it is the eighth wonder of the world. But at the end of the day, it is a cartoon. It is a product that's made to be sellable. Whatever emotional highs and lows you went through when you were reading a series, your favorite mangaka probably wrote the idea in his notes app while he was taking a dump and then brought it up casually with his editor, and they thought, yeah, you know, that's a good idea that can help us extend this story for another 3 months. For these people, it's their career and they're fortunate to be doing the thing that they want to do for a living. I understand that being a mangaka, it's a difficult job, but it's also a job that no one put a gun to your head to do. That's why I don't get super attached to series when they start going in directions I don't necessarily like or they're marketed a certain way. I find the shoujo that I'm attracted to and I watch it. I don't really go out of my way to try and dissolve truths about shoujo because of my bias. I have a strong enough understanding of media and business to come to the realization that maybe shoujo is like Western films or sci-fi or mecha or any of those other previously very popular styles of art and media that just fell by the wayside. To get something greenlit today, it has to be an adaptation of an already existing IP, a remake of something that was successful 10 years ago, or a series that has been able to survive long enough to keep on getting pushed further and further, because you're going to pick up new demographics that didn't exist at the inception of this IP. You're going to pick them up over time, thus proliferating your series to a point that it never could have been before. See One Piece, Naruto, Dragon Ball, Demon Slayer, Attack on Titan. These are all shonen series that were able to address the change of the times. They were able to adapt their art style. They were able to extend their stories. They were able to develop them. These aren't the most groundbreaking pieces of literature that I've ever read, but they were engaging. They were entertaining. They did things that shoujo does not do, that the shoujo magazines don't allow their mangakas to do, that editors don't encourage their creatives underneath them to explore. I can't claim to have seen all of Colleen's videos, but I can claim to have watched a good amount of them, and other creators on this platform who have spoken about shoujo. I've read a lot of shoujo myself. I came up on shoujo, and I think that shoujo is dead. It killed itself because it couldn't change, because the authors didn't want to take risks. The few that did were able to talk about them today, but there's a reason why there's really only, I don't know, a dozen fantastic shoujos slash joseis that the casual fan knows, but that same casual fan is able to talk about 12 anime that they're watching this season that they like just as much, if not more. I think Yamada-kun is a great series, and I'm not seeing a lot of love for it, and when I ask people about it, they express that they're not interested because it's a shoujo. I would like to see shoujo fans prop up modern day shoujo, which Colleen does often, but I would like to also see less tension against other communities and more acknowledgement of what happened to this demographic, and maybe understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be as popular as shonen. It doesn't have to be compared to shonen, even if that was the case in the past. Media is so different today that I don't even think demographics matter anymore. I don't think labeling really does. It matters to us because we're in niche communities, but at the end of the day, we're anime fans, so maybe we should stop being so precious with these pieces of media. Maybe we should stop deflecting and being so aggressive to people that want to explore it a bit further, and just acknowledge the fact that the thing that entertains me so much probably isn't that great. Because of the nature of my work, I collaborate very closely with niche creators. Colleen exhibits all of the traits from some of my most successful clients, and I wouldn't be surprised to see her at 100k subs this time next year. I would just love to see more nuance with the videos that she puts out. A strong voice like that in shoujo should definitely take some ownership as to why shoujo is a shell of what it once was.